So we came up like with 3.8 billion, but we want to calculate the range. And so in this range, we have the possibility to negotiate. But this one is way too high. But the questions was were also in this text that what's better, to stay with it, to work together, or continue to work together with Pixar, take the whole company, or find somebody else and go to competition by them. So this is why we are just now discussing about these issues. I hope we go in the right direction.
Okay. Almost everybody realized that they paid too much.
Ah, you see.
Yeah, but the idea was, and most people that pay too much delude themselves into thinking that they're going to be able to develop synergies, other markets, et cetera, that will compensate the buyers for the paying 2.5 times more than it's worth.
Right.
And I think in hindsight, I think they did develop the synergies because the Pixar's made a shit ton of money post the what was the acquisition 10 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but that's tough to predict. When you're doing all this on paper on a spreadsheet. That's why 90% of the time, when you pay too much, you pay too much. But the guys that made the decision in 2006 are probably not there in 2016. So you got nobody to blame. And when you're writing off the value of assets, etc., they said, "Oh, those assholes," But then again, the guy that made the decision in 2006 could be president of the whole organization now. So you can make acquisitions work out if you're in a position of power. You can reallocate assets, you can reallocate costs, etc., and you can make it, look better than it is. I believe, and I don't know all the details, that Pixar investment has generated huge amounts of cash flow.
Mostly came from Pixar,
Yeah.
cash flow and free cash flow.
Yeah. So the guy that made the final decision to pay 2.5 times its cash flow value is probably considered a genius now. But if Pixar hadn't worked out, it's like buying oil at $40 a barrel. If oil stays at $40 a barrel, goes to 20, it's not a good idea. If oil goes back to $100 a barrel, it's a genius. So, it's a crapshoot, but I'm the last person to say the paying up for assets doesn't work because, I bought assets for too much and I bought assets on the cheap. But when I bought assets for too much, ostensibly too much, is because I was buying a dream team, engineers, geologists, etc., that I didn't have internally. When I bought stuff on the cheap, other than I was buying it out of desperation, just to get deals done, it worked out to my favor because the assets went up, 5, 6, 7 times. Mm-hmm. If they hadn't gone up 5, 6, 7 times, I wouldn't have been the $400 million man, and then none of this would have happened, and I wouldn't have been creating equity and value for you kids, to the tune of more than $50 billion now. So hindsight's 20/20. Yeah. That's the beauty. But hindsight being 20/20, doesn't always work out to your benefit. And the reason for the Pixar case is to show several things, not the least of which is that you can pay over the top to the tune of 250, 300%, and the acquisitions still work out. But there's got to be another strategic view, and the strategic view was the kind of things that Pixar did, animation, etc. And so what they were really making a bet on, and I was a part of the decision-making process, is that animation was the way of the future. And they bet right. It was. Look at all the high-grossing movies that have happened in the last 10 years. A good portion of them are animated.
Yeah, but what you do with the management? They have these both companies, they have different style of management. Pixar is a new company, like, 200 people were there, and they were more effective, more efficient.
Oh, well,
And you compare to Disney, and it's a different style.
well, Disney's an old conglomerate now, and was then. But most acquisitions, and there's been studies done, I think some of the studies that have been done at Harvard, don't work out because of the cultural clashes.
Daimler Chrysler was the case.
Yeah, classic example. But AOL, Time Warner was a classic example. I mean, everybody knew the acquisition was a $2-3-4 billion acquisition, and if I remember correctly, they wound up paying 11, 12, 13 billion, and it didn't work out because the cultures were so diverse that Time Warner was a business. AOL was this is an exaggeration, but a bunch of slappy, happy, weed smoking, ponytail, earring,
In text was a good example. They talked about that if they buy Pixar, they want to bring also Steve Jobs on the board. But Steve Jobs wasn't comfortable. I mean, they were the board of directors from Walt Disney weren't comfortable to bring this guy because he works for the investors and not for the board to look great. It was also an issue.
And Steve Jobs was a preeminent, idea guy, make the investors happy, and they'll make you happy. And Time Warner was certainly not, the purchasers of Pixar were certainly not that. They were suits. Pixar wasn't suits. We're not suits. And it's a clash. I mean, even today. I mean, are there companies big enough to buy Facebook? Yeah. Would they buy Facebook? Would a bunch of suits buy Facebook? Not likely. Because of the difference in culture. Would Amazon ever buy, and then you have to find out who's got enough money to buy a Facebook. Well, Amazon has enough money. Walmart has enough money. But Walmart is run by suits personified, so that's not going to happen. Amazon, Bezos isn't exactly a suit, but he's more of a suit than I would imagine that Zuckerberg is. So, when some of these acquisition candidates that people talk about, you have to think, is there anybody really big enough to buy them? Assimilate them, not just be able to raise the finance. Amazon's got a lot of cash, but I'm sure that they would they would get a lot of debt on buying a Facebook. So, but the Pixar acquisition worked out. For the people that paid so much damn money for it.
So now that we figured out the range of how much it was worth back in 2006 and how much they acquired it for, I guess now we have to figure out what was the added benefit behind going after that acquisition and overpaying for it since then.
Well, they paid for approximately 2.5 times.
Right.
But they had smart guys figuring out what the cash flow was. But they made a decision. But the other thing is some of these acquisitions they all take on a life of their own. When the CEO or the driving force on the board decides that he wants to buy the son of a bitch, they overlook the obvious. They want to get it done. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the kids, guys that manage these companies, run these companies, are not only worried about the return on investment, the return on capital, etc. They're interested in their own legacy. And Eisner was Eisner CEO then, Disney?
I think so.
He was, Eisner was just before, he left in 2005.
Okay, he left.
And then he got another new guy.
Well, he might have left because he didn't want to do Pixar. I don't know that.
He had a problem with Steve Jobs.
Okay, well then he did leave. Because Eisner's a suit, for sure. And Jobs was the epitome of not being a suit. But there's always a thought process, and even though I preach and teach and tell you structure's got to follow strategy, invariably they'll find an asset that they think is undervalued, and the structure doesn't follow your strategy, but they think that you can realign it, and it's very difficult to realign a big company's structure and the acquisition candidate's strategy to your strategy. It's easy to do on paper, as we say. We've never seen a business plan fail on paper. And some of these acquisitions, all the acquisitions have some paperwork. And whoever wrote the paperwork, wrote it with a successful acquisition being completed as the end result. But one, not all of them are successful, and two, of the ones that are successful, 3/4 of them plus don't work out because of the very fact that I just alluded to. They're bought for the wrong reasons. Because you just can't bolt on companies if they make no sense. Okay, well, you got the right idea. Now you got to come up with, as Ed said,
The added value.
if any,
Yeah.
the added value.